In the last episode, we looked at the positive attributes of the Church of Thyatira, but today we will look at the criticism. Let's start with the text.
Starting in verse 20. But I have this against you, that you tolerate the woman Jezebel, who calls herself a prophetess, and she teaches and leads my bondservants astray, so that they commit acts of immorality and eat things sacrificed to idols.
The Jezebel mentioned here is symbolic, referencing the Old Testament Queen Jezebel, who led Israel into idolatry and immorality. In order to understand what is being said here in this passage, we will need to familiarize ourselves with 1 Kings chapter 16. Let me try to summarize the story for time's sake. King Ahab was the ruler of Israel, and he married a woman by the name of Jezebel, the daughter of Ethbaal, king of the Sidonians. She opposed the worship of the Hebrew god Yahweh by seducing and manipulating her husband. She replaced the worship of the true God with the worship of Baal and Asherah. She went as far as having the altars dedicated to Yahweh torn down and desecrated, and the prophets of Yahweh killed. Only 100 prophets of Yahweh survived. Meanwhile, she uses the royal provisions to fund the 450 prophets of Baal and the 400 prophets of Asherah during a severe famine in Samaria. All of this played into her influence, drawing the people away from the one true God and bringing them willingly into a system that satisfied their pleasures and senses, until more and more of the children of God sought after this deceptive system. Now let's fast forward to 1 Kings chapter 21.
There was a vineyard near King Ahab's palace in Samaria. A man from Jezreel named Naboth owned it. One day Ahab said to Naboth, "Give me your vineyard that is near my palace. I want to make it a vegetable garden. I will give you a better vineyard in its place. Or, if you prefer, I will pay you for it." Naboth answered, "By the Lord, I will never give my land to you. This land belongs to my family."
King Ahab was so disappointed that he shut himself in his room away from everyone and refused to eat. Jezebel walks in and finds him pouting.
"But you are the king over Israel. Get out of bed and eat something, and you will feel better. I will get Naboth's vineyard for you."
And so Jezebel wrote letters to the leaders in Naboth's town. By writing them in Ahab's name and using the king's wax seal, she made the letters look like official correspondence.
Announce that there will be a day of fasting when the people will eat nothing. Then call all the people of the town together for a meeting. At the meeting, we will talk about Naboth. Find some men who will tell lies about Naboth. They should say that they heard Naboth speak against the king and against God. Then take Naboth out of the city and kill him with stones.
Verse 15. When Jezebel heard this, she said to Ahab,
"Naboth is dead. Now you can go and take the vineyard that you wanted."
So Ahab went to the vineyard and took it. Meanwhile, the Lord called upon a prophet named Elijah to go to the king and deliver a message from God. This prophet finds him in the vineyard and tells him that God is angry at him for his wickedness and for causing the Israelites to sin. And as a result, God would destroy him and his family, and his wicked wife Jezebel would be eaten by dogs by the wall of the city of Jezreel. Initially, King Ahab humbled himself before the Lord, and God showed mercy on him for a time. But eventually he returned to his old ways, and in 1 Kings chapter 22, King Ahab and King Jehoshaphat of Judah go to war against the Arameans. A soldier off in the distance pulled back as far as he could on his bow and shot an arrow into the air. The arrow happened to hit King Ahab in a small hole where his armor was fastened together while he was sitting in his chariot. He died and was buried. But it is recorded that when the servants went to wash the chariot at a pool in Samaria, dogs came to lick up the blood.
Verse 25 to 26 gives us the biblical problem with Ahab. Surely there was no one like Ahab, who sold himself to do evil in the sight of the Lord, because Jezebel his wife incited him. He acted very abominably in following idols, according to all that the Amorites had done, whom the Lord cast out before the sons of Israel.
Now let's turn our attention back to Jezebel. It's estimated that she lived for 10 to 14 years after King Ahab's death and continued to wield influence as queen mother. But a new king rises up from the northern kingdom of Israel, who was anointed by a prophet of God to execute judgment on the house of Ahab and Jezebel and purge Ahab's lineage along with Baal worshippers. Jehu, the new king of Israel, given a divine mission, rides like a storm to bring down the house of Ahab and to avenge all the blood of the prophets that Jezebel had spilled. He strikes down Jezebel's son, the king, and moves toward the city where the old queen waited. When Jezebel heard that Jehu was on his way, she painted her eyes. She arranged her hair, and she stepped to an upper window to look down on him. As Jehu rode through the gate, she attempted to manipulate him by calling down a sharp insult, by comparing him to a traitor whose reign had lasted only 7 days, implying his fate would be similar. This was a queen who would remain defiant to the bitter end. A few of her own servants appeared at the window beside her, and Jehu gave a single command, "Throw her down." And they did. Her reign ended in an instant. King Jehu went into her home, ate and drank, and then instructed that she be buried. But 2 Kings chapter 9 records in verse 35 that they went to bury her. They found nothing more of her than the skull and the feet and the palms of her hands. The warning the prophet Elijah gave to King Ahab back in 1 Kings chapter 21 happened just as he said. The men returned to King Jehu and reported back to him, saying,
This is the word of the Lord, which he spoke by his servant Elijah the Tishbite, saying, In the property of Jezreel the dogs shall eat the flesh of Jezebel, and the corpse of Jezebel will be as dung on the face of the field in the property of Jezreel. So they cannot say, This is Jezebel.
I've taken a lot of time to lay out the history Christ uses as an example to this church. What did Christ intend to teach with this reference? First, King Ahab married Jezebel to secure a political alliance with Sidon, but by doing so, her influence soon reshaped Israel's religious and political life. Similarly, we learned from the Church of Pergamum that the church had likewise joined itself to the government under Constantine's rule. Christ is warning this church of the corruption of outside influences. Secondly, the story of King Ahab and Jezebel is a story about what happens when a nation trades its foundation for whatever is fashionable in culture. It's a story about how quickly the church can abandon the commandments under the influence of an outsider who manipulates God's truth for a different spiritual covenant that's not of God, selling it as if it's okay with God. Jezebel divided the soul of Israel between Yahweh and Baal by enticing people to worship other gods. This church is warned that whoever causes you to worship anyone and anything other than the Father, Son, and Spirit, the one true God, is causing your heart to be divided and causing sin. Third, we learn from this story that judgment doesn't always fall at the same instant the crime is committed. Sometimes it walks and it waits. Jezebel may have interpreted this interval as a victory, but don't be fooled by God's patience in holding back judgment. Evil may rise for a season. It may seem to win, but it will not stand forever. Because the God who brought down a queen and vindicated her crimes is still the same God today. Fourth, here is maybe a more dangerous lesson to this story. Jezebel might be the most obvious problem, but the most dangerous was King Ahab. He is presented as weak, pathetic, and easily controlled. He was the king who should have known what was right, and he had the authority to stop the evil. In weakness, he simply stayed silent. And many of the church's problems come from this very issue. This is a warning to the church that evil rarely wins through the strength of the wicked alone. It wins through the silence of those who should have spoken. Finally, the last piece this story demonstrates is that every single word spoken by the prophet came true. Why is this important? Because we can be absolutely sure every word spoken in this book will also come true.